So let's talk about the Makerfield by-election. The good people of Makerfield in Greater Manchester will get to make a decision next week. Will they effectively install Andy Burnham as Prime Minister, or will they block his path to power? There's some really interesting polling coming out, and we need to put a bit of a health warning on this polling. It's been reported in the newspaper, and the Labour Party is very keen to emphasise it, but it suggests that Restore Britain, that the party that is to the right of reform, could be on as much as 14%, which brings reform down massively and gives Andy Burnham a very significant lead. Again, these are polls, got to take it with a pinch of salt. This is private polling as well. The public polling shows a rather different picture. But nevertheless, I mean, Brendan, what do you make of this potential of the potential for Restore to be a kind of spoiler party in this by-election?
Yeah, I mean, as you say, we need a pinch of salt with all of this because you read that it's 12% or it's 7%, or, I'm hoping it's more like 2% or something way down, because I find Restore Britain to be such an annoying party. I think they're the your party of the right, a bunch of cranks and idiots, and very sectarian. If you look at the leadership of the party in particular, it is pretty much singularly devoted to stopping reform. They hate Farage because Rupert Lowe, the leader of Restore, had a famous fallout with Farage, and it seems to have devoted his life now to getting one over on Farage. So the whole upper echelons of the party are obsessed with screwing up reform's chances, getting one over on Nigel Farage. That seems to be their great mission in life. And it might come off in Makerfield. They might actually put a spanner in the works of reform's rebellion and let Andy Burnham swoop into power and then potentially take over the whole country. I think it's awful behavior. I'm sure Restore has lots of good, ordinary, working class people up in Makerfield campaigning for it. So I'm not talking about those kinds of people. But if you look at the leadership of the party and its spokespeople and the kind of digital army that hangs on Rupert Lowe's every word, and they're constantly making memes of Rupert Lowe as a kind of shirtless Henry V about to go into battle with the Muslims. I mean, talk about a bunch of whack jobs. If you look at that layer of the party, it's like a game to them. It's like they're having fun. And that's what really pisses me off, because they are robbing the good working class people of Makerfield of this extraordinary gift they've been given, which is the opportunity, should they want it, to rip the crown from the King of the North, Andy Burnham, to deprive him of a seat in the Commons, to deprive Labour of any hope of maybe giving itself a bit of spit and polish and renewing itself with a new leader. The people of Makerfield have got an extraordinary opportunity to really say no to all of those elite machinations, and instead to say, we're going to take a punt on reform. Instead, we're going to stick it to the machine. We're going to stick it to the man. And Restore seems to be screwing that up for a laugh, for the memes, in order that they can go online and say, ha ha, look what we're doing. So it's childish sectarian politics of the kind that we normally see on the left, with your party, although they seem to have collapsed, and these kind of left-wing sects that are constantly saying, we hate Labour, we want to do this, we want to do that. So I find it incredibly annoying, and it's such a shame, because Makerfield deserves to be a really important historic showdown between the old establishment and this new urge amongst ordinary people for a different kind of politics, for a more serious approach to questions about borders and immigration and history and culture, all of those things that reform are promising to address. So I just think Restore's behavior is childish, nerdish. It feels like the revenge of the nerds. He's blocking the way of ordinary working people who want to do something quite important. So yeah, I'm not a fan of what they're doing at all.
Yeah, I mean, Rakib, what do you make of it? I mean, Restore insists that they're not stealing anyone's votes. They have their own voter base. I think the polling suggests otherwise. So John Curtis has said that it is basically Reform voters moving over there. It does seem strange to have such a vigorously anti-reform party on the right. I thought that was the job of the Lib Dems or the Labour Party or whatever it might be.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've made the point that there's no party that has a God-given right to someone's vote at the end of the day. And I think that if there are voters who have previously flirted with reform but now looking to vote for Restore Britain, I think the question to ask is, why are they doing so? Why are they entertaining that possibility? Now, I'm saying this as a Muslim social conservative, but one possibility is that they might feel particularly anxious over the presence of Islam, the growing presence of Islam in the UK, even though Makerfield itself is quite an ethnically and religious homogenous place. I just think about looking at just society more generally, what people may have experienced in different parts of the country, or what they see is going on in terms of demographic change. And we have experienced remarkable forms of demographic change in recent times. And I think that there's something to be said that if people feel anxious from an ethnic or racial perspective, now it may well be possible that they don't really see Reform UK as a party for them. They might want something which is, well, I mean, some people will say far right, but they might want an option which is more hardline. Now, the truth is, Restore Britain is a formal political party, and you could say it offers a pressure valve in a way for people who fall into those kind of attitudes, into that worldview. And I think I'd much rather have a formal political party as opposed to those kind of views being driven underground, or potentially people flirting with what you'd consider to be flirting with organizations which might be prescribed. You'd consider them to be genuinely extremist organizations. So I think that I understand that some people might feel frustrated because this essentially may allow Andy Burnham to get through back to the Commons through the back door. But ultimately, I'd make the point that Reform UK, in a way, I think it's it shot itself in the foot in a way. I think that when I saw the candidate selected by Reform UK to stand in the Makerfield by-election, on paper, Rob Kenyon, it looks pretty good. He has that unique employment history of being previously employed by the NHS and the armed forces. Those are two institutions traditionally which are very highly respected by society. But then there's some social media content that came to light. We won't get into the nitty gritty of that. I'm sure the
Apologies
people
to
who
Carol Vorderman.
yeah, apologies to Carol Vorderman. And they're just talking about a little sniff here or there. But I think I think the point to make is that I just see it as this. There's parties there which are throwing their hat in the ring. Voters have more political options now, and I think that we have a very fragmented electoral marketplace, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. And as I said, that many people said, this is depriving Reform UK of a historic victory. Well, then maybe they need to adopt a different approach then in order to win the by-election. I think that's maybe something to be said. So overall, I don't necessarily have that dim a view of Restore Britain potentially depriving Reform UK of a historic victory in the Makerfield by-election. And I just think that ultimately, I think it's just good that voters now have more political choices on the table nowadays.
Brendan, should we talk a little bit about Andy Burnham? I mean, he wants to be the next Prime Minister. He has run a very local campaign, at least in the last week or so. It feels as if he was making all kinds of pronouncements on national issues and pretty much all of them U-turns, let's be honest, and has now kind of fallen out of the limelight, not really had anything to say about Belfast or Henry Novak or any of the big issues. Most recently, he's U-turned on the question of the WASPy women, the women who say that they lost their pensions because they lost a letter in the post or something, decades ago. But Burnham just feels like nothingness. It just doesn't feel like much of a solution to Britain's problems. I doubt even a solution to Labour's problems.
Yeah, I agree. He's, there's not much to him, is there? And it tends to be the kind of SW1 crowd who go all goggle-eyed for him. They're the ones who think he's the king of the north. They're the one who thinks he's Mr. Manchester. He's done wonders up there, and he's gonna, transform the country if he gets into power. There's the fandom around Andy Burnham in the kind of Westminster bubble is really creepy, I think. And you do get the sense that they almost see the Makerfield by-election as a coronation for Burnham. Of course he should just waltz in and get this seat and then waltz into Downing Street and so on. I think a lot of people in Makerfield are thinking, and this came up on the Makerfield question time the other week. A lot of people there are thinking, well, he's just using our constituency in order to further his own career and to become, get to the top of the greasy pole. And it's pretty clear that's what he's doing. He blows with the wind, doesn't he? He changes. One minute he's a Blairite, next minute he's a bit more socialistic, the next minute he's cuddling up with private enterprise, and then he's saying I'm socialism light. Manchesterism is the way forward. You don't know which way he's going to point tomorrow. It changes constantly, and then he changes his mind on things like gender self-ID, for example. He now recognizes that's a more controversial position than it might have been a few years ago. I think he deserves to be called out on a lot of the stuff that he's done, and the media isn't doing that sufficiently, I think. So, for example, in Manchester, he is seen as not having handled the rape gang scandal very well at all, and in fact having kicked it into the long grass for too long, and people are worried about how he handled that. His attempt to bring in a kind of ULEZ style scheme in Manchester was incredibly unpopular. Some of us will remember that after the Manchester Arena bombing in 2017, he couldn't even bring himself to say the word Islamist. He just kept saying extremist. He wouldn't name the ideology that had just slaughtered 22 young Mancunians. In my view, not a serious politician, and certainly not the politician we need right now, which is someone who is willing to say something about the Henry Novak scandal, or the Belfast situation, or the migrant crisis, or the Islamist threat. All these things that need to be spoken about clearly and frankly. He's not the man to do that job. So, in a sense, I'm not that worried if he does sweep into power. I mean, I would prefer that he didn't, because I just think it would be so historic and hilarious if the people of Makerfield prevented him from doing this. But I'm not that worried if he does, because Labour's problem is not just Keir Starmer. Labour's problem is Labour. It's a party that was founded to represent working class people, but which now looks down its nose at them, which looks at them as gammon who screwed up the country with their vote for Brexit, and they're all a little bit racist. And, maybe Labour should cozy up to the middle classes and the public sector workers instead. So Labour has a historic crisis, an existential crisis. Andy Burnham might offset that for a couple of years by being a new face, but fundamentally he won't fix it.